Captain Deho stood looking out at the dark space around his ship. The human research vessel. Harmony was floating quietly in the empty area between stars. They had been hiding here for weeks, waiting and watching. The humans knew something big was coming, and they were right. Suddenly, the space in front of them started to glow and crack. Giant ships began appearing one after another. The NIGMA Empire had finally found them. These alien ships were huge, much bigger than anything humans had ever built. Their dark metal hulls were covered in weapons that could destroy entire planets. The NIGMA were known across the galaxy as the most dangerous warriors who had ever lived. On the bridge of the Harmony, young officer Yeji was working at her station. She had been tracking alien signals for months, learning their patterns and trying to understand their plans. The NIGMA had been searching for humans for a long time. They wanted to add human worlds to their empire, just like they had done. To hundreds of other species, Commander Minho ran up to Captain Deho with urgent news in his hands. He had been studying the NIGMA ships through their long-range scanners. The alien vessels were arranged in perfect attack formation. There were over 2,000 ships in the fleet. Each one was armed with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. The humans had only 50 ships in their entire fleet. The communication system suddenly came alive with an incoming message. Captain Deho told his crew to put it on the main screen. A terrible alien face appeared on the display. The NIGMA Admiral had 4 red eyes and sharp teeth that looked like knives. When he spoke, his voice was full of hate and anger. The NIGMA Admiral told the humans they had 2 choices. They could surrender immediately and become slaves of the Empire, or they could be destroyed along with every human world in the galaxy. The Admiral laughed as he spoke. He said humans were weak creatures who had no right to travel. Among the stars, the NIGMA had conquered over 300 species, and humans would be just another easy victory. Captain Deho listened to the alien threats without showing any fear on his face. His crew looked worried, but they trusted their captain completely. The humans had been preparing for this day for many years. They knew the NIGMA would come eventually, and they had made plans. In the lower levels of the ship, engineer Hana was working with her team on something very secret. They had been building special computer programs for months. These programs were designed to attack alien technology in ways no one had ever tried before. The NIGMA thought they were superior because of their advanced machines. But Hana knew that sometimes the most advanced technology had the biggest weaknesses. Lieutenant Seung Min had spent years learning NIGMA language and studying their culture. He knew that the NIGMA were proud and thought they were better than every other species in the galaxy. This pride had made them careless. They never expected that a primitive species like humans could threaten their mighty empire. Dr. Tae-hyun brought Captain Deho the most important information of all. His research team had discovered something amazing about how the NIGMA Empire worked. Every ship, every weapon, every computer in their entire civilization was connected to one giant brain called the core mind. This supercomputer controlled everything from military battles to food distribution on NIGMA worlds. The core mind was supposed to make the NIGMA Empire invincible. No enemy could fight against them because the computer could coordinate millions of ships and weapons at the same time. It could predict enemy movements and respond faster than any living creature. But Dr. Tae-hyun had found a terrible weakness. If someone could get inside the core mind, they could control or destroy the entire empire. Captain Deho made the decision that would change history forever. Instead of running away or surrendering, the humans would attack, but this would not be a normal space battle. The humans would use their greatest weapons, intelligence, creativity, and the ability to think in ways their enemies never expected. The NIGMA Admiral was still talking on the communication channel. He was giving humans 1 hour to surrender or face complete destruction. He did not know that human agents had already begun infiltrating his ship's computer systems. While he was making threats, human hackers, were quietly moving through NIGMA networks like invisible ghosts. Young pilot J1 was preparing his stealth fighter in the ship hangar. His mission would be the most dangerous part of the human plan. He had to get close enough to the NIGMA flagship. To plant a special virus directly into their main computer, the stealth fighter was painted black and equipped with technology that made it nearly impossible to detect. Officer So Young was coordinating with human agents scattered throughout the galaxy. These brave men and women had been living among alien species for years, pretending to be traders and researchers. They were actually spies gathering information and preparing for this exact moment. When the signal came, they would begin sabotaging NIGMA facilities on dozens of worlds. The hour deadline was almost over. Captain Deho opened a communication channel to respond to the NIGMA admiral. Instead of begging for mercy or trying to negotiate, he did something unexpected. He smiled and told the alien commander that humans accepted his challenge. The NIGMA admiral was confused by this response. He had expected fear and surrender, not confidence and defiance. As the NIGMA fleet began moving into attack position, they had no idea that the humans had already started their assault. The alien ship's sensors could not detect the tiny human programs that were spreading through their computer networks like a disease. The NIGMA were about to learn that sometimes the smallest enemies are the most dangerous ones. Captain Deho watched the enemy fleet approaching and felt no fear. His people had turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. Humans were not as strong or as advanced as the NIGMA, but they were creative, adaptable, and most importantly, they never gave up. The mighty NIGMA Empire was about to discover what happened when they underestimated the human spirit. The second day began with the NIGMA fleet moving closer to human space. Admiral Crix stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, feeling very confident about the coming battle. His ship, the Destroyer of Worlds, was 5 kilometers long and armed. With weapons that could crack planets in half, the humans had shown no signs of running away, which surprised him, but he thought they were just too stupid to understand how hopeless their situation was. What Admiral Crix did not know was that human agents were already inside his ship. Lieutenant Seung Min had used stolen access codes to hack into the NIGMA communication systems. He was moving through their computer networks like a ghost, copying files and learning their secrets. The NIGMA had built their systems to keep other aliens out, but they had never dealt with human hackers before. Engineer Minho was working with a team of the best computer experts humanity had ever produced. They had studied NIGMA technology for decades, waiting. For this chance, the aliens had made everything automatic. Their ships flew themselves, their weapons aimed themselves, and even their toilets flushed themselves. This dependence on computers was about to become their greatest weakness. Dr. Hana had created something that had never existed before, a computer virus specifically designed to attack alien technology. This was not just any virus, but a program that could learn and grow stronger as it spread through enemy systems. It was designed to look like normal maintenance data so NIGMA security would not notice it until it was too late. The virus was hidden inside routine supply reports that were sent between NIGMA ships every few hours. These reports contained information about fuel, levels, food supplies, and ammunition counts. The aliens never bothered to check these boring messages carefully. They just let their computers process them automatically. This laziness would cost them everything. Pilot J1 climbed into his stealth fighter and checked all the systems. His ship was humanity's greatest secret. It could fly invisible through space using technology that bent light around the hull. The NIGMA had never seen anything like it because they thought humans were too primitive to build advanced spacecraft. His mission was simple but extremely dangerous. He had to fly his fighter into the middle of the enemy fleet, get close to Admiral Crick's flagship, and upload the virus directly into their main computer. If he was caught, the entire human plan would fail, and his people would be destroyed. The stealth fighter launched from the Harmony and disappeared from all sensors. J1 flew carefully through the NIGMA fleet, dodging between the giant warships the aliens had. No idea he was there. Their scanners were looking for big ships and missiles, not a single small fighter using human technology. Meanwhile, Specialist Yun Su was coordinating the cyber attack from the human command center. She was watching dozens of screens that showed the progress of human agents throughout NIGMA space. The infiltration was going better than anyone had hoped. The aliens were so confident in their security that they barely monitored their own systems on NIGMA worlds across. The galaxy human agents were preparing for the next phase of the plan. Trader Hyun Jung was on the NIGMA capital world pretending to sell rare metals to alien merchants. In reality, she was gathering information about their planetary defense systems and marking targets for future attacks. Research scientist Min Ho was working at a NIGMA university studying their history and culture. The aliens thought he was just a harmless academic, but he was actually mapping their computer networks and finding ways to cause maximum damage when the time came. The first signs of trouble appeared in the NIGMA fleet during the afternoon. Several ships reported minor problems with their navigation computers. The errors were so small that most captains ignored them. They thought it was just normal computer glitches that would fix themselves. Admiral Crix received reports of these problems, but he was not worried. The NIGMA had conquered hundreds of worlds, and their technology had never failed them before. He ordered his fleet to continue moving toward human space for the final attack that would end this annoying species forever. What the Admiral did not realize was that each small computer error was actually the virus spreading through his ship's systems. Like a disease, it was copying itself and moving from computer to computer. Every time a NIGMA ship sent a message or shared data, the virus spread a little further. By evening, the virus had infected over half the NIGMA fleet, but the aliens still had not noticed anything seriously wrong. Their computers were still working mostly normally with just occasional small problems. The humans had designed the virus to work slowly at first, so the enemy would not realize they were under attack. J1 finally reached Admiral Crix's flagship after flying for hours through the enemy fleet. The massive ship was so big that it had its own gravity and atmosphere. He found a docking bay and carefully landed his fighter among the NIGMA shuttlecraft. The aliens on duty did not see him because his ship was still invisible. Getting out of his fighter, J1 activated his personal stealth suit and walked through the enemy ship like a ghost. The NIGMA crew members walked right past him without knowing he was there. He followed the signs to the main computer center deep inside the ship. The computer center was guarded, but the guards were bored and not paying attention. They had never had to deal with intruders before because everyone knew that attacking a NIGMA flagship was impossible. J1 slipped past them and found the main computer terminal. Working quickly and quietly, he plugged a small device into the computer. The device contained the most advanced virus humanity had ever created. Within seconds, it began copying itself into the NIGMA main systems. From here, it would spread to every ship in the fleet and eventually to every computer in the entire NIGMA empire. The upload finished, and J1 carefully removed the device and started walking back to his fighter. No alarms had been triggered and no guards had noticed him. The most important mission in human history was complete, and the NIGMA still had no idea what had happened. As night fell on the second day, the virus was spreading faster through NIGMA systems. The aliens were starting to notice more computer problems, but they still thought these were just technical difficulties. Their engineers were trying to fix the errors, but every time they thought they had solved one problem, two more appeared. Captain Daeho received a coded message confirming that the virus had been successfully planted. The real attack would begin tomorrow when the program activated its most destructive functions. The NIGMA Empire had less than 24 hours left before their technology turned against them. The mighty NIGMA fleet continued its approach to human space completely unaware that they were already defeated. Their own computers were preparing to destroy them, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The humans had turned the aliens' greatest strength into their final weakness. The third day started with strange things happening throughout the NIGMA Empire. On the flagship, Admiral Crix was drinking his morning meal when his personal assistant told him about problems with the communication systems ships were receiving. Garbled messages, and some were losing contact completely. The Admiral was annoyed but not worried. These kinds of technical problems happened sometimes with such a large fleet. What Admiral Crix did not know was that the human virus was now fully active in his systems. Lieutenant Seung-min was watching from the human command ship as NIGMA computers began to fail in exactly the way they had planned. The virus was spreading faster than the aliens could detect it, moving from ship to ship and world to world. Dr. Hana monitored the virus progress on her screens. The program was working even better than she had hoped. It was learning from every NIGMA system it infected, becoming smarter and more dangerous. Every time the aliens tried to fix a problem, the virus adapted and found new ways to cause trouble. The first major failure happened when a NIGMA destroyer tried to change course. The navigation computer gave the wrong coordinates, and the ship flew directly into an asteroid field. The captain tried to correct the mistake, but the steering controls were not responding properly. The ship crashed into a large rock and was destroyed instantly. Admiral Crix received the emergency report and was confused. How could an experienced crew make such a basic navigation error? The destroyed ship had been in service for over 50 years and had never had any serious accidents. The Admiral ordered an investigation, but his communications were so disrupted that the message never reached the investigating team on NIGMA worlds across the galaxy. The virus was causing chaos that the aliens could not understand. Traffic control computers started giving contradictory directions, causing massive accidents in their cities. Power plants began shutting down randomly, leaving millions of people without electricity. Food distribution systems mixed up their orders, sending meat to vegetarian worlds and vegetables to carnivore planets. Engineer Minho was tracking all these failures from the human command center. He had predicted exactly how the NIGMA would react to each type of problem. When their main communications failed, they would switch to backup systems. When those failed, they would try direct ship-to-ship messages. But the humans had infected every single communication method the aliens used. Captain Daeho watched as more NIGMA ships began to malfunction. Some vessels started spinning in circles because their navigation systems were receiving random coordinates. Others opened fire on empty space because their weapons thought they were under attack. The perfectly organized NIGMA fleet was turning into a collection of confused and dangerous ships. Specialist So Young was coordinating with human agents on NIGMA worlds, who were now beginning the physical sabotage phase of the plan. While the aliens were distracted by their computer problems, the agents were destroying important facilities that could not be reached through cyber attacks. Agent Tai Hyun was on a NIGMA military base where he worked as a maintenance technician. While the base computers were failing, he quietly planted explosives in the main power generator. The aliens were so busy trying to fix their computer problems that nobody noticed him walking around restricted areas. On the NIGMA capital, world agent Hyun Jung received the coded signal to begin her mission. She was working in a facility that manufactured computer chips for military spacecraft. Using her access to the factory, she introduced tiny flaws into the manufacturing process. These flawed chips would cause even more computer failures when they were installed in new ships. The virus had now spread to the NIGMA core mind itself, the giant computer that controlled their entire civilization. Dr. Hana watched in amazement as the program began corrupting the alien database. Everything from military strategies to scientific research was being scrambled beyond recognition. Admiral Crix finally realized that something serious was happening when his flagship lost contact with half the fleet. The communication breakdown was so complete that he could not even send simple messages to ships that were flying right next to him. When he tried to use the emergency communication system, that also failed. The admiral called his best computer technicians to the bridge and demanded answers. The technicians ran diagnostic tests, but every system they checked showed different results. Some computers said everything was working perfectly, while others reported catastrophic failures. The technicians had never seen anything like this before. By midday, panic was spreading through the NIGMA fleet. Captains who had been confident warriors just hours before were now afraid to give any orders because their computers might interpret the commands incorrectly. Some ships were flying in the wrong direction, others were preparing to attack their own allies, and a few had lost life support and were drifting helplessly through space. The situation was even worse on NIGMA planets. Hospitals could not function because their medical computers were providing wrong information about patients. Food production facilities were creating poisonous combinations of chemicals instead of edible meals. Transportation networks had completely shut down, leaving billions of aliens stranded wherever they happened to be. Commander Yunsu received reports from human agents throughout NIGMA space, the empire that had seemed invincible. Just 3 days ago was falling apart so quickly that many aliens thought they were under attack by some kind of supernatural force. They could not imagine that primitive humans had caused all this destruction with nothing but computer programs. The NIGMA government tried to send emergency broadcasts to their people, but the communication systems were too damaged to carry clear messages. Instead of reassuring speeches, the broadcasts consisted of random noise and garbled words. This made the panic even worse as people thought their leaders had abandoned them. Admiral Crix made a desperate decision. He ordered all ships to return to manual control and stop using their computers completely, but this created an even bigger problem. Most NIGMA had never learned to fly their ships without computer assistance. Generations of depending on automatic systems had left them helpless when the technology failed. Several NIGMA ships attempted manual flight and immediately crashed into each other. The alien crews had no idea how to calculate flight paths or navigate through space without their computers helping them. The few experienced pilots who remembered the old ways were not enough to save thousands of ships as evening approached. On the third day, the NIGMA Empire was in complete chaos. Their mighty fleet was scattered and mostly helpless. Their planets were in the grip of system-wide failures, and their government could not communicate with anyone. The humans had achieved. In 3 days, what no military force had accomplished in 1,000 years of galactic warfare. Captain Deho prepared for the final phase of the human plan. The NIGMA were defeated, but not yet destroyed. Tomorrow would bring the end of their empire, forever. The aliens who had thought humans were too primitive to be a threat were about to learn that underestimating humanity was the last mistake they would ever make. The fourth day brought total disaster to every world in the NIGMA Empire. The virus had now reached even the most remote planets and was destroying everything that depended on computer technology. Billions of aliens who had never heard of humans were suffering because their leaders had decided to threaten the wrong species on the NIGMA capital world. The government was trying to maintain control, but their own building systems were failing. The doors would not open, the elevators were stuck between floors, and the air conditioning was producing poisonous gases instead of clean air. Government officials found themselves trapped in their offices, unable to communicate with anyone or escape from the building. Minister Vex was the head of NIGMA military planning, and he was becoming desperate. He had sent emergency messages to every military base in the Empire, but none of them had responded. The communication breakdown was so complete that he did not even know if any NIGMA forces were still operational. What Minister Vex did not realize was that human agents had been sabotaging military bases throughout the night. Agent Min Ho had destroyed the main ammunition depot on the fortress world of Kalar. The explosion was so large that it created a mushroom cloud visible from orbit. When other bases tried to investigate the blast, their communication equipment mysteriously stopped working. The NIGMA had built their entire civilization around the belief that technology would solve every problem. Their cities were controlled by computers, their factories were run by artificial intelligence, and even their farms used automated systems to grow food. When all of this technology turned against them at once, the results were catastrophic. Dr. Hana was monitoring the virus spread from the human command center and was amazed by how quickly the NIGMA society was collapsing. The aliens had made themselves so dependent on computers that they could not perform even basic tasks. Without electronic help, most NIGMA did not know how to cook food manually, how to calculate simple math, or even how to open doors without computer assistance. On the industrial world of Nexus, the automated factories that produced NIGMA weapons were creating defective equipment instead of functional weapons. The virus had corrupted the manufacturing programs so that every weapon produced would explode when fired, every vehicle would crash when started, and every computer chip would burn out. Within minutes of activation, Lieutenant Xiong Min intercepted desperate messages from NIGMA commanders who were trying to coordinate some kind of response. But every time they made a plan, their communication systems would deliver the wrong information to the wrong people. Orders to retreat were being received as commands to attack, and requests for help were being sent to enemy positions instead of friendly forces. The chaos was spreading faster than anyone had expected, Agent Yun Su reported from the NIGMA Trading Center on Fortuna that the economic systems were completely destroyed. The virus had corrupted all financial records, making it impossible to know who owned what or how much money anyone had. The aliens who had been wealthy the day before were now completely broke and did not even know. Its space traffic around major NIGMA worlds had become extremely dangerous because the navigation computers were giving ships incorrect flight paths. Hundreds of vessels were crashing into each other or flying into planets. The few ships that tried to escape the chaos found that their hyperspace engines would not work because the jump calculations were all wrong. Captain Deho received a report that made him smile for the first time in days. The NIGMA Imperial Academy, where they trained their best military officers, had suffered a complete system failure. All of their training programs, all of their strategic databases, and all of their historical records had been erased. The next generation of NIGMA leaders would have no knowledge of how their ancestors had built the empire. The virus had now infected the NIGMA medical systems with terrible results. Hospitals were giving patients the wrong treatments. Operating rooms were being sterilized with deadly chemicals instead of safe cleaning agents, and medical computers were providing false information about diseases and injuries. Thousands of aliens were dying not from human attacks, but from their own medical technology. On the agricultural world of Verde, the farming computers had been reprogrammed to produce poison instead of food. The aliens did not realize this because their food testing equipment was also corrupted. Millions of NIGMA were becoming sick from eating contaminated food, and their hospitals could not help them because the medical systems were equally damaged. Admiral Crix was still on his flagship, trying to regain control of his fleet, but the situation was getting worse every hour. Ships that had been following orders the day before were now flying in random directions. Some vessels had lost life support and their crews were suffocating in space. Others had suffered complete power failures and were drifting helplessly through asteroid fields. Admiral tried to send a surrender message to the humans, but his communication equipment could not locate any human ships. The virus had corrupted his sensors so badly that he could not tell where the enemy fleet was, or even if it still existed. For all he knew, the humans might have left the area and gone home, leaving the NIGMA to destroy themselves. Engineer Minho was working on the next phase of the human plan, which would ensure that the NIGMA could never rebuild their technology. The virus was about to enter its final stage, where it would permanently erase every piece of scientific and technical knowledge in their civilization. The aliens would be left with nothing but primitive tools, and would have to start over from the beginning. Specialist So Young coordinated with human agents who were now moving openly through NIGMA territories. The aliens were so distracted by the chaos that they did not notice humans walking through their cities and military bases. The agents were gathering intelligence and preparing for the final assault that would end the NIGMA Empire forever. As night fell on the fourth day, the NIGMA civilization was barely recognizable. Most of their technology had stopped working. Their government could not function, and their military was scattered and helpless. Billions of aliens, who had been proud citizens of the galaxy, most powerful empire, were now struggling to survive without the computers they had always depended on. The humans had proven that sometimes the most advanced civilizations were also the most vulnerable. The NIGMA had built their empire on technology, but they had forgotten that technology could be turned against them. When they chose to threaten humanity, they had made the last mistake their empire would ever make. Captain Deho prepared his fleet for the final attack. Tomorrow would bring the complete destruction of NIGMA power and the beginning of a new age in the galaxy. The species that everyone had dismissed, as primitive, was about to become the most feared force among the stars. The fifth day began with Captain Deho giving the order that would change galactic history forever. The human fleet moved out of hiding and began its final approach toward NIGMA space. For the first time in 3 days, the humans were making themselves visible to any sensors that might still be working in the alien empire. The NIGMA had spent the night trying desperately to repair their damaged systems, but every attempt had failed. The virus was now so deeply embedded in their computers that removing it would require rebuilding every piece of technology from scratch. This was something that would take decades, even if they had the knowledge and resources to do it. Admiral Crix looked out at space from his flagship and saw something that filled him with terror. Human ships were approaching from every direction. Their fleet had grown larger overnight and seemed to include vessel types he had never seen before. The humans had been hiding their true military strength and were now revealing it for the final battle. What Admiral Crix did not know was that many of the approaching ships were actually disguised cargo vessels and research ships that had been converted to look like warships. The humans were using psychological warfare, making their fleet appear much more powerful than it actually was. The demoralized NIGMA crews were ready to believe that humanity had unlimited military resources. Lieutenant Seung-min was broadcasting false radio signals that made it sound like human. Reinforcements were arriving from multiple star systems. The NIGMA who intercepted these messages thought they were facing an invasion force of millions of ships. The truth was that humanity was still badly outnumbered, but the aliens were too confused. And frightened to realize this, Dr. Hana had prepared the final version of the virus which would complete the destruction of NIGMA civilization. This new program would not just corrupt their computers, but would completely erase every piece of technical knowledge in their databases. Once this virus was released, the NIGMA would lose all understanding of how their technology worked and would never be able to rebuild it. The target for this final attack was the core mind itself, the massive computer complex on the NIGMA capital world that controlled their entire empire. Strike Team leader Ji Woo had trained for months for this mission. She would lead a small group of elite human commandos directly into the heart of enemy territory to destroy the brain of their civilization. The NIGMA capital world was in chaos when the human strike team arrived. The planetary defense systems had been offline for days, and the few guards who remained at their posts were more concerned with finding food and shelter than with watching for enemies. The humans were able to land their ships without being detected or challenged. Ji Woo and her team made their way through the alien city toward the core mine facility. The streets were filled with confused and desperate NIGMA who were trying to survive without the technology they had always depended on. Most of them did not even notice the humans walking past them because they were too busy dealing with their own problems. The core mine facility was Supposed to be the most secure building in the NIGMA Empire, but its defenses were completely useless. The electronic locks could not tell friend from enemy, the security cameras were showing random images instead of real surveillance footage, and the automated weapons were pointing in wrong directions. Engineer Minho was with the strike team carrying the final virus on a portable computer device. Getting into the core mind facility was surprisingly easy because the alien guards could not even operate the doors without computer assistance. The humans simply walked past the confused guards and entered the most important building in the NIGMA Empire. Inside the facility, they found the core mind, a computer so large that it filled an entire building. The massive machine had been controlling the lives of billions of beings across hundreds of worlds, but now it was struggling to perform even basic functions. The virus had damaged it so badly that its displays were showing error, messages in dozens of different languages. Minho connected his device to the core mind and began uploading the final virus. As the program spread through the alien computer, he watched centuries of NIGMA scientific knowledge disappear forever. Technical manuals that had taken generations to write were being erased in seconds. Research data that had cost billions of credits to gather was vanishing without a trace. The effects of the core mind destruction were immediate throughout the NIGMA Empire. Every remaining computer system shut down permanently. Spaceship engines that had been barely working stopped completely. Planetary power grids that had been struggling to function went dark forever. The few NIGMA facilities that had survived the previous attacks finally succumbed to total system failure. Captain Deho received confirmation that the core mind had been destroyed and broadcast a message to any NIGMA who could still receive communications. The terms were simple and non-negotiable. The NIGMA Empire would immediately cease all military operations, release all conquered species, and withdraw to their home worlds. They would also destroy any remaining weapons and promise never to threaten other civilizations again. The alternative was complete extinction. Captain Deho made it clear that humanity now possessed the power to destroy any technological civilization in the galaxy. The NIGMA had learned this lesson too late. But other species should take note of what happened. When someone threatened human survival, Admiral Crix tried to respond to the human ultimatum, but discovered that his communication systems were completely dead. The virus had finally reached his flagship and destroyed the last working computers. On his ship, he was now commanding a fleet of dead hulks that could not fight, navigate, or even maintain life support across the galaxy. NIGMA commanders who still retained some ability to communicate began sending surrender messages to the humans. Those who had once been proud warriors were now begging for mercy and promising to obey any terms humanity demanded. The mighty empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was completely broken. The few NIGMA scientists who understood what had happened realized that their civilization would never recover from this attack. Without the core mind and without their technical databases, they had lost the knowledge needed to build or maintain advanced technology. They would be forced to live like primitive beings, using only basic tools and manual labor. As the fifth day ended, humanity had achieved the impossible. They had destroyed the most powerful empire in galactic history, without losing a single ship or soldier. The humans had proven that intelligence, creativity, and determination were more powerful than any weapon or technology. The NIGMA Empire was finished, and every species in the galaxy would remember this lesson. The small, primitive humans who had been dismissed as harmless had become the most feared military force in known space. The age of human dominance was about to begin. The final day of the NIGMA Empire began with complete silence across their once mighty territories. The core mind was dead, their fleets were powerless, and their worlds were dark. Captain Deho stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the end of a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years. The human strike team was still on the NIGMA capital world, watching the final collapse of their enemy. Jiwoo reported that alien civilians were wandering the streets in confusion. Unable to understand how their perfect technological society had crumbled so quickly, most of them had never learned basic survival skills and were struggling to find food and shelter without computer assistance. Engineer Minho had completed his mission at the core mind facility, but he stayed to observe the final destruction of NIGMA knowledge. The massive computer that had once coordinated the activities of hundreds of worlds was now displaying nothing but random symbols and error messages. Centuries of scientific advancement had been erased in a matter of hours. The psychological impact on the NIGMA people was devastating. Their entire culture had been based on the belief that they were superior beings destined to rule over primitive species. Now they discovered that the most primitive species of all had destroyed them completely. Many aliens were suffering mental breakdowns, unable to accept that their empire was gone. Admiral Crix was trapped on his powerless flagship along with his crew. The ship that had once been capable of destroying planets was now a floating tomb in space. The admiral tried to maintain discipline among his officers, but they could see that their situation was hopeless. Some crew members were already talking about abandoning ship in escape pods. The escape pods would not launch because their computers were dead. The life support systems were failing because their controllers had been corrupted. Even the doors between sections of the ship would not open without electronic assistance. The NIGMA had made themselves so dependent on technology that they could not survive when it was taken away. Lieutenant Seung Min intercepted desperate messages from NIGMA worlds throughout their territory. Local governors were reporting complete social collapse as their populations realized they could not function without the automated systems they had always relied on. Some worlds were experiencing riots as different groups fought over the remaining resources. Dr. Hana was monitoring the spread of panic through NIGMA space and was amazed by how quickly an advanced civilization could fall apart. The aliens had built cities that required constant computer control to provide water, electricity, and air circulation. When these systems failed, the cities became uninhabitable, death traps on many NIGMA worlds. The population was fleeing from the cities and trying to return to a more primitive way of life. But most of them did not know how to grow food, build shelter, or even make fire without technological assistance. Millions of beings who had lived in luxury were now facing starvation and exposure. The few NIGMA leaders who retained some ability to communicate were sending increasingly desperate surrender offers to the humans. They offered to give humanity entire star systems, advanced technology, and vast amounts of wealth in exchange for help rebuilding their civilization. Captain Dae-ho rejected all of these offers. The terms he had stated were final and non-negotiable. The NIGMA would accept complete defeat and return to their home worlds, or they would face total extinction. There would be no negotiations, no compromises, and no second chances. Some NIGMA military commanders tried to organize resistance movements using whatever equipment still functioned, but these efforts failed quickly. Without the core mind to coordinate their activities and without reliable communication between units, they could not mount any effective opposition to human demands. Agent So Young reported that NIGMA weapons factories were producing useless scrap metal instead of functional equipment. The virus had corrupted their manufacturing programs so thoroughly that they could not even make simple tools correctly. Any attempt to rebuild their military would take decades and would require knowledge that no longer existed. The economic systems of the NIGMA Empire had also collapsed completely. The virus had destroyed all financial records, making it impossible to determine ownership of property or resources. Without functioning banks, communication networks, or transportation systems, trade between worlds had stopped entirely. Specialist Yoon Soo coordinated the final phase of human operations, as agents throughout NIGMA space began destroying any remaining technology that might be useful. The goal was to ensure that the aliens could never again pose a threat to any other species in the galaxy. Agent Tai Hyun destroyed a research facility that had been developing new weapons technology. Agent Hyun Jung sabotaged a shipyard that could have been used to rebuild the NIGMA fleet. Agent Minho eliminated a computer center that contained backup copies of technical manuals. The humans were being thorough in their destruction as reports came in from across the galaxy. It became clear that the NIGMA Empire had suffered the most complete defeat in recorded history. They had lost not just their military and government, but their entire technological civilization. Within less than a week, they had been reduced from galactic conquerors to primitive survivors. The other species in the galaxy were watching these events with amazement and terror. The humans had accomplished what no military alliance had been able to achieve. They had proven that any civilization, no matter how advanced, could be destroyed if it became too dependent on technology. Captain Deho broadcast a final message to the galaxy explaining what had happened and why the humans had not wanted war, but when threatened with extinction, they had responded with ruthless efficiency. The NIGMA Empire was gone and would never return, but other species could avoid the same fate by treating humanity with respect. The message was clear. Humans were no longer the weak, primitive species that other civilizations could ignore or threaten. They had announced themselves as a major power in the galaxy and had demonstrated their ability to destroy any enemy. The age of human expansion was about to begin. Admiral Crix finally managed to send a personal surrender message to Captain Deho using an old emergency transmitter that had not been connected to the ship computer systems. He begged for mercy for his crew and promised that the NIGMA would never again threaten human worlds. The response was swift and final. The NIGMA fleet would be allowed to return to their home worlds, but they would travel in primitive ships without advanced technology. They would be monitored by human agents, and any attempt to rebuild their empire would result in immediate destruction. As the sixth day ended, the galaxy was a very different place. The NIGMA Empire was history, and humanity had emerged as the new dominant species. The humans had proven that ruthless intelligence was more powerful than any weapon, and that underestimating them was a fatal mistake that no one would make twice. The other alien civilizations began sending diplomatic messages to human space, offering friendship trade agreements and alliance treaties. Everyone wanted to be on good terms with the species that had destroyed the mighty NIGMA in just 6 days. The humans had earned their place among the stars through the most decisive victory in galactic history.